Hi guys, this is George back here with another video and welcome to another news update where today we are going to be talking about the closure of a roller coaster here in the UK. Not just any roller coaster, it is the oldest roller coaster in the UK, the Scenic Railway at Dreamland Margate. And this news was shared yesterday by the park, and to be honest it's not the biggest surprise in terms of news that we were all expecting this for this ride. It's been SBNO for a while, and throughout the video I'm going to talk a bit about the history of this ride and also what might be next for the future of Dreamland. So this ride originally opened in 1920, and in its first 3 months of operation over 500,000 people came to ride this ride. It's a very iconic ride, and if it was still in operation today, it would be the oldest roller coaster in the UK, as well as that the third oldest roller coaster in Europe, and also the sixth oldest roller coaster in the world. So it's an old ride, it's very iconic, and it's certainly had a bit of a rocky history, but a lot of people still got to ride it, a lot of people loved it, and it was certainly an icon for this park. The main reason that people would go and visit Dreamland Margate. Originally, I did get to ride this in 2019. I had 3 rides on it, I think, and yeah, I did really enjoy it. It was a pretty long ride. You had 2 lift hills on there, lots of double down drops and double ups. Of course, it wasn't the most thrilling of rides. However, it's an old coaster, so you wouldn't expect it. And as much as it was an old coaster, I rode it when it was 99 years old, it was still butter smooth. It was one of the smoothest roller coasters in the country, which is surprising considering how old it is. So this used to be able to run 5 trains as well. So towards the end of its operation, it could run on 2 trains. When I went, it was on 1 train. However, back in the day, it could run 5 trains. That was before, when the ride originally opened, it used to not stop for guests getting onto the ride and also getting off the ride. So you would enter and exit the train whilst it was still moving. And at that point, it meant it could run 5 trains on the circuit. And there was also no seatbelts on the ride at this point as well. So if you rode this coaster, then you'd know that you wore a little seatbelt over it like you would if you were in a car. However, that was added on as a later addition to the train. But yeah, before those were added, the ride just wouldn't stop in the station. You'd get on and off the train whilst it was still moving, and that would allow for the coaster to run 5 trains, which is a really interesting fact. It's fair to say it had a bit of a rough history in terms of fire. Of course, a lot of old school wooden coasters at some point in their life would have had an issue when it comes to fires. This coaster, there was 3 fires on this ride. We'll talk all about this. So the first fire was in 1949, the first fire. There was another fire in 1957. So 2 fires in less than a decade on this ride. During the first fire, a big section of the ride was destroyed and it was rebuilt. Same thing happened again in 1957. Another section caught on fire, but it was rebuilt. The park were very committed to keeping this ride around for future generations to be able to enjoy. They always looked after this ride, made sure that it was running at its best and ensuring that they could keep it running as well as they can do. And the fact, of course, that this ride cannot be removed. It is a grade 2 star listed building. I believe it was 2002 that it was listed as grade 2 building, and then it was later on at some point, I think possibly 2012, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll put a little edit in to find out the year for that. But then it was listed as a grade 2 star building, so of course that means that this cannot be removed. So we'll talk more about that later, because of course, yes, the coaster's closed, but it's not going to be going anywhere. We know it's not going to be operating as a roller coaster anymore. However, it's not going to be going anywhere, and I'll talk more about that later. As well as that, in terms of fire, there was also an arson attack on the coaster in 2008, and this pretty much closed down the entire park. A lot of the structure was burnt down and the park closed. And there wasn't really any news about what was happening with it. However, in 2015, the park reopened again with the Scenic Railway. It was back in operation, and then a few years later in 2018 they added a lot of new rides. They added 8 new rides in 1 year, which was really impressive. I visited this park the year after they added all these new rides, and it was absolutely thriving. There were loads of people there, lots of rides. It was really turning into this big like seaside amusement park that we love here in the UK, like turning into like a mini Blackpool Pleasure Beach, like Margate's version of that. It was starting to really thrive. However, there are rumours. I did want to get this in because I saw someone comment about this on social media and I thought that's really interesting. I didn't know about that. But according to someone on social media, they put in a comment on someone else's post, they said that there was an attempted arson attack in 2014. So of course you had the one where it did light on fire in 2008. There was an attempted arson attack in 2014, and supposedly there's a local rumour that it was actually the owners of the park that were trying to set this ride on fire, because of course it was already having problems at this point. 2008 it was already burnt down, the park was closed at this point, there were big financial troubles behind the scenes, and the rumour is that this was the owner's way of potentially just being able to get rid of this roller coaster without technically kind of destroying it. But of course if there's an arson attack, then if you wouldn't expect it to be the park operators, but the rumour is that of course with it being a grade 2 star listed building, they couldn't remove it, so this was kind of the only way that they could try and remove it without having to, like, during these financial problems for the park. So that's certainly very interesting. I did want to get that in to this video. But yeah, of course we know then the park reopened in 2015. However, since then, they have started to go down a bit more of a different route, starting to host a lot of concerts and events at the park, and they've definitely had less of a focus on rides over the last couple of years. They removed a lot of the rides that they added in 2018. They have added a couple of new rides over the years. Like a couple of years ago, they added a new coaster that was a relocation from Black Gang Chine over on the Isle of Wight. And also last year, I think it was in 2025, they added a new log flume as well, which was the log flume that used to operate at Paulton's Park. So it's definitely not a case of them not having a focus with rides. However, they definitely seem to be going more down a concerts route rather than rides, and also being, you come for the concerts and then whilst you're there you can get on a couple of rides as well. But they definitely don't seem to have as much of a focus on the rides, especially now that their main attraction is closing. However, in terms of what's actually going to happen to the Scenic Railway, of course I've mentioned it cannot be destroyed with it having that grade 2 star listed status. One of only 3 coasters in the UK to have this status, which is really impressive, to be fair. It's a really interesting kind of fact for this to have, and the fact that no matter what happens with it, it can't be removed. The park have confirmed that it's not going to be operating as a roller coaster again. We all knew this was coming. However, they have also said this isn't the end but a new beginning. So this is really interesting because of course this ride is still going to live on. So in the summer they've got a pop-up event which is going to be around the Scenic Railway. You can go in and learn all about the history of the ride, have a little bit of an exhibition of the ride, which is going to be really cool. So yeah, that'll be really interesting to see what that's like. But as well as that, they've also got some more plans for this ride as well, and they haven't said too much about it. However, a lot of people have been speculating maybe there's going to be track walks that we could do. Of course, with the ride not having particularly steep drops, then it wouldn't be particularly difficult to walk around the track. So maybe if they just added a few extra rails and safety features, then that's something that they could potentially look into. There's also been talks of turning the station into a museum. Imagine going into the old station and having the train on display and like pictures of the ride and showing all its history in there, and then you could like go into the museum, see all of that, and then do the track walk. That would certainly be a really cool way to kind of reuse this ride, but not having it operating as a roller coaster. So we'll have to see what happens in regards to the Scenic Railway at Dreamland Margate. But it's certainly very sad to see this ride close. It was very iconic. I was looking to go back to Dreamland Margate at some point. I wanted to go last year, but it didn't happen. So I would have gone this year. But now that the Scenic Railway is not there anymore, I don't know when I'll be making my way back to Dreamland Margate, so we'll have to see what happens with this. But that's now the end of this video here. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at George Kelly and follow me on Twitter at George Kelly. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll see you all later. Bye.